Hello, welcome to the Jamal Thomas Show. My name is Jamal Thomas. I am here happy to be joined with Kim Iversen. That, come on, there we are. I'm happy to be joined with Kim Iversen. Kim Iversen is host of the Kim Iversen Show on YouTube. You can find her. She has all sorts of interviews from all sorts of people. And I became aware of you when you first started YouTube. And I've been aware of you since. And every so often I would pop in on the show. And as I was looking through it, you've had great interviews, even to the point of having RFK on the show.
Yeah.
I mean, first, happy belated Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I was hoping you were going to say hello, everyone. So I've known about you longer than you've known about me, because before I did my YouTube show, I learned about you because my dad would watch you every day, and I would hear. And my dad and I were actually in Italy for 3-4 months. We were in Italy and in Denmark, but mostly in Italy. And we went on a big trip, and I was working not in politics per se. I wasn't doing a show or anything at that time, so I was able to work remote. But anyway, I would hear him on his iPad. He would carry his iPad around and watch Jimmy Dore, and I would hear Jimmy Dore all day. And I would also hear hello, everyone. And then my dad started to say that he would like, I knew he was about to watch your show because he would say it. He'd go, hello, everyone. And then he'd hit your show and start listening.
How is your dad? Is he doing all right?
He's great. Yeah, he's doing great. Yeah. So I've known about you for a long time because you were one of his main shows that he watched. I'm sure he still does. I just don't know because I don't live with him anymore. We were living together in Italy at that time, so I don't know all of his habits. But yeah, so I've known about you for a really long time.
That's so
Hello,
cool.
everyone.
That is so cool. I'm always weirded out when people, well, not weirded out, but I'm always happily surprised when when somebody says, "Are you Jamal Thomas?" Yeah.
Oh yeah, my dad really likes you. He'd love to meet you someday. Or did he meet you? Did he meet? He didn't meet. No, he hasn't. Because we went out to DC. Yeah, we were out to DC for like the Rage Against the War Machine rally, and he was able to meet a lot of people in the tent. Even when I wasn't looking, I was seeing him, in the tent where they had all the people were coming in and out, and he got to meet a lot of people that day. So he was pretty excited about that.
That's so cool. I love that. I love that. I have to start off with this because, I've asked everybody for the most part when they've come on the show, not necessarily to dwell on it. Why did Harris lose? And why did Trump win?
Well, according to the Democrats, it's because of misinformation and a brainwashed society, right? Because Kamala Harris was a perfect candidate. Yes, misogyny, bigotry, racism, right. She was a perfect candidate. Don't you know, Jamal, she was perfect. She was flawless. The only thing that caused her to lose was Joe Biden. That bastard didn't resign fast enough. I mean, that's the narrative that these idiots have, right? They just really do not understand. And I don't even know how they can look themselves in the mirror and say that with a straight face but I mean, it makes sense when for the duration of Biden's term, they sat there and said, he doesn't have any mental, don't worry about his mental, he's sharp as a tack. We were watching him on TV and the guy's literally bumbling around, no fault of his own. He got old. I mean, that's what happens with older age for a lot of people. Yeah. And so that's okay that this has happened, but this is kind of like elderly abuse at this point, like what they did to Dianne Feinstein, right? I mean, that was like really
that was horrible. That woman basically died in office. I mean, right. She looked bad.
Yeah, she was really bad. And I think they're doing that to Mitch McConnell now too. I think they're doing some elderly abuse to him because he clearly
sat up there and looked like he had a stroke at the dispatch box. Did you see that? I mean, it just looks horrible. I don't get why they keep dragging these people out there when they should be at home eating applesauce, watching Jerry Springer or something.
They should be watching YouTube. That's what the old people do these days.
Right. I mean, it's astonishing when you see that stuff. And it's like they die on the bench. The woman on the Supreme Court bench died on the bench.
Yeah.
It's just amazing to me. It's like you can't find nobody else to do that. I mean, Mama Bear is still fit as a fiddle, fair enough. But even she's up in the ages. I mean, it's just amazing to me. And I agree with you. According to them, blacks were misogynistic Blacks, some of them were racist. Hispanics were misogynistic. And then they got spiteful about it. They're like, if you get taken away or your family members, you own it. Or you Arabs, look at the bomb and you deserve it. And it's like, okay, that is grotesque.
Yeah. They've lost the plot completely. The issue with Harris, and I said this before Joe Biden even took office, before he even selected his VP pick, I had been saying his VP pick will be Kamala Harris. Everybody should pay attention to this because she is the one that they have anointed to go next. She is next in line. The reason I knew that was because during the Kamala Harris campaign, when she was running for president, she ended up basically being given the entire Hillary Clinton campaign apparatus. They had put all of their eggs in Kamala Harris. They gave her all of the advisors, the funders, everything from Hillary Clinton, and she was being heavily backed by the Clinton machine. So I knew that for whatever reason, the Clinton machine, they believed in their assessment that Kamala Harris would be popular, that she would end up being the one that would get the nomination. I mean, they thought, they kind of did these calculations, and they totally and completely were wrong on those. And Kamala Harris couldn't even get to the first round of the primaries. She had to drop out before even the first vote. And, but it didn't matter. I watched them still. They then kind of scrambled a little bit. They were like, oh no, what do we do? And then they pivoted. And you know who they pivoted to? And this is also an important point, Pete Buttigieg. They then started moving those resources to Pete Buttigieg. And they said Pete Buttigieg is the one now that, but it was a little bit split. There were people in the Hillary Clinton apparatus that were not thrilled with Pete Buttigieg. They wanted to maybe go in a different direction. And that direction was, who is that senator woman from the North? She's from one of the northern states. Moderate.
Elizabeth Warren?
No, moderate. I'm talking about like a real moderate. That's like, and she's in between. She's like Minnesota or Wisconsin.
Oh, I know you're talking about.
And they really liked her.
What is her name? She was
kind of redheaded, like. Yeah,
is that the one?
Right.
Like
I think Kamala was. Yeah, I think they both were. But yeah, I don't know what I forgot the senator right now.
I can see her face. I just can't think of her name. It'll come to me in a moment.
Real moderate. So some of the Hillary Clinton apparatus wanted to go with her, and the others, but the majority of them wanted to go with Buttigieg. So they mostly went with Buttigieg, but it was still kind of split. And then they ultimately, and we saw what happened in the caucus with Buttigieg, Bernie Sanders. They claimed that Buttigieg won. They declared this early before the results of the Iowa caucus. And they were like, Buttigieg wins. And in the end, actually, Bernie Sanders had won, but they didn't actually mention that for a week. They were trying to give Pete Buttigieg momentum. They basically, I mean, whatever you want to call that with voting, but it was really a scam. And then, they cheated. And then they tried to get him some momentum so that Bernie would drop out. And then ultimately when they saw that Buttigieg just people weren't taking him either, like they didn't take to Kamala, they then pivoted to Joe Biden, right? But I knew it. And I said, look, they're going to make Kamala the VP because they're going to hope that America will take to her once she's VP in the White House, pictures in the Oval Office. They'll give her some tasks. Like they're hoping that they're going to build up her profile and people will then like her the next time around. And guess what? They also gave Pete Buttigieg a position, right? They made him Secretary of Transportation. So they gave those two cabinet positions, Kamala Harris, the most prominent one, obviously. And then when she was, I remember even back when I was on talking terms with Tulsi Gabbard, I even messaged Tulsi when he announced Kamala. And I said, Kamala is going to be replacing Joe Biden. I don't know when or how they're going to do it, but they're going to replace Joe with Kamala. And then I went on my show and I started saying that all the time, like Kamala, I don't know when they plan to do this swap, but they do plan to do a swap and they will swap them out. And I've been saying this from that whole time. And the reason is just that they had put all of their eggs in Kamala. The establishment likes her because she's quite frankly not very bright. And not that she's stupid. I don't think she's a stupid person. And I don't buy into the whole, like she slept her way to the top. I mean,
God, I hate that stuff.
Whatever people will always say, and that is like misogynistic stuff to say about women, like, oh, they didn't, I get it that she's not the brightest and there are people, but plenty of not bright people get promoted all the time, all around us. So, I mean, whatever, but she's not very smart. And so they like that. They like a controllable person who they just give her this title and she's happy to have it. And then they could control her and tell her, This is the type of stuff we want you to do. You know, basically the deep state would really be truly running the president, running the Oval Office. And that's what's gone on with Joe Biden. And they wanted to continue that with a Kamala Harris. And so they just, I mean, that's what they did wrong. What they did wrong was they never consulted the voters. They decided, and they decided a long time ago it was Kamala Harris. They didn't care that she didn't get any votes in the primary for the presidential in 2020. They didn't care that her ratings went down while she was vice president, that their plan of trying to build up her profile did not work. They didn't care that voters didn't vote her in even during there was no Democratic primary to replace Joe Biden. They didn't even do an open, an open convention. They did nothing. Right. They just shoved her down everybody's throat. And they're planning on doing it again. I mean, that's how stupid they are. They're planning on doing it again. They're like, well, they haven't learned any lessons. And they're sitting there saying, yeah, in 2028, Kamala Harris again. Will just, this time though, she'll run her flawless campaign for longer and people will love her. And it's just, they're idiots.
$5 billion.
Yeah, I mean,
that is a hell of a grift. And
well, you know, a lot of people bought her, so they don't want their investment to go to waste. They want to see her in the Oval Office. They paid a lot of money for her, and they've been able to buy an American president. So, you know, what they hope to be buying an American president. And so, yeah, I think that she'll be running again, which is so stupid. I mean, just they need to develop some talent and they need to develop a bench. And they lie on the statistics. They say she's still the most popular when we run polls against, you know, when we run her up against like Gavin Newsom or Tim Walz or AOC or like blah, they name all these people and they say Harris is the most popular, which is not true. They lie on the polls. She's just not. I think
their issue runs deeper than just the bench because I don't think it's a person issue. I think it's a party issue.
Oh yeah.
Where it's like you have a party that is supposed to be philosophically representative of the working class. Because otherwise, what's the point?
Right? But you don't let them vote.
Exactly. Right. Like there's this saying that when the center fails, the wings or the people on the periphery of the parties start to get into the political space because the center failed. Right.
Yeah.
It's like the public is looking for the people to do a responsibility, a job. They're not putting you in for anything. And it's like, okay, the center has lost credibility. Okay, who are these people on the wings, the flaming people on the sides? Okay, well, let's give them a try. And so they go to Trump. Trump wins it because they don't have super delegates. They didn't have control of the apparatus. And they go to Sanders. Sanders has a political coalition, and they do any and everything in their power to stop him. Meaning, in that election year, if you were looking for a candidate who wasn't a centrist, who wasn't conventional, Sanders would have won that race, but he was never allowed to get to that. So in the race where you were looking for this kind of breakthrough candidate, you get the most establishment candidate in the history of candidates, Hillary Clinton, versus the breakaway candidate, Donald Trump. I mean, it's they really need to have some soul searching. And if they run Kamala Harris again, they earn another loss. I just can't imagine them doing that. From your standpoint,
yeah, but they will. I couldn't imagine that they were even going to, with her ratings having gone down during the vice presidency. I then changed and said, okay, maybe they won't swap him out with her. I mean, they'll swap him out, but not with her, because how could they possibly be that dumb? But they are that dumb. I mean, I gave them the benefit of the doubt and shouldn't have. Turns out they're that dumb. So yeah, they'll run her again. And, you know, the other thing is that they didn't like Bernie because he's like Donald Trump. You don't really know what he's going to do and you can't control him. And the establishment is firmly controlling our government for certainly the Democratic Party at this point. And that should wake up voters. I mean, anytime a party screams about democracy, 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 they're blinding you and brainwashing you into believing that they're the party for democracy, all while they rob you of democracy. And that's what they've done.
Yeah. What did you think of some of these lefty channels? Because you have two propaganda outlets, MSNBC and Fox. Both of them shamelessly represent their political parties.
Right.
Then you get these kind of appendages of the various parties. I don't necessarily know on the right, but on the left, let's say like a Young Turks, a Sam Cedar, a secular talk that basically says vote Democrat, and became Kamala Harris triumphalists. I mean, Cal had video after video after video about how, oh, this new factoid came out, and it looks bad for Donald Trump. This looks great for Kamala Harris. And then on election night, he was like I was telling you guys all through this election, and it's like she lost. I remember David Pakman came out like a week after the election. He says, "Oh my God, I'm losing people. I've been losing subscribers. I lost 10,000s of subscribers." And he says, "I call all of my lefty friends, and all of them have been losing subscribers also." And I was like, "I haven't lost any."
Yeah, me neither.
yeah. Sabrina, she was like, "I haven't lost any."
Yeah.
Like, do you think these people are appendages of the Democratic Party? Do they just agree with blue no matter who stuff? And more to the point, in my point of view, blue no matter who damages the candidate because it allows weak candidates
to
get publicity. They don't seem to realize that. Give me your take on that.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think that for some of those shows, I do think that they're actually funded by these. I like, for example, I think Minority Report with Sam Cedar is funded by MSNBC, or at least at one point was. So I think that they are sort of the independent appendage of the mainstream media. And so they are being paid and, for those opinions, or to stay in line with whatever it is. I mean, but that's why media has lost its bite, for Americans. I mean, Americans just don't trust the media anymore because it's just propaganda. It's no longer independent analysis. And had they been honest, they could have said, "I prefer for Kamala Harris to win. I really want her to win, but the party is screwing up, and this is what the party needs to do, and this is what her messaging needs to be, or this is who they should have picked." Or they could give an analysis that still is rooting for their team, but is an honest analysis. And they just fail to give an honest analysis. I mean, when you're sitting there and Joe Biden's literally bumbling his way through something, and you're saying he's sharp as a tack. I mean, look at him. He's just never been sharper. People they don't trust you anymore. They're like, "What? You're calling me, the viewer, stupid by trying to tell me that this guy's sharp as a tack when he's obviously not." And it would be better for, and then that viewer is sitting there like, "I really want Democrats to win. I'm afraid of Donald Trump. He's Hitler incarnate," or whatever, right? Yeah. But then they watch these pundits and the party lie, and it just destroys all of that trust. When really they would have been better served had they just said, "Yeah, I mean, we got a problem here, and we probably should be holding a Democratic primary and seeing who all these other, see who's up to bat in the Democrat." But they just lost their, and that's why people don't trust the mainstream media. They lie about everything, all for politics. And a lot of these independent ones do as well. And I don't know if it's because they're paid necessarily why they take on, but the brain rot is real. I mean, they're being rewarded. I mean, this is one of the things like I know with COVID and stuff, I don't know. I know you and I had some disagreements on.
Yeah. Those were good disagreements though.
But like an example of this is like, for example, when I was on.
By the way, my audience agrees with you on the COVID stuff. They hate
that
point of view.
You know what, Jamal? Because it turned out, anyway, the vaccine does not stop the spread. Anyway, so when I was on The Hills Rising, I was on with Ryan Grimm. At one point, my two co-hosts were Ryan Grimm and Alyssa Farah. Alyssa Farah is now on The View. Okay.
Right.
So she got promoted, elevated. Her career got to take off. I got smeared. A conspiracy theorist was written about in the Daily Beast, all for saying the vaccines don't stop the spread. Alyssa Farah, I've got video of her sitting next to me and me saying, "Well, we know now from all of the data that's actually come out of Israel, because they got the vaccines first, and they were talking about their third dose before we even got our first over here in the United States. So I already knew this thing does not stop the spread. Otherwise, they wouldn't be talking about that in Israel. So I said on air, "Well, we now know that the vaccine doesn't stop the spread." And she sat there and goes, whoa. That is not true. That is not true. And throughout the entire time we were co-hosting the show together, she painted me as a conspiracy theorist, made it to where I was wrong. But look at who the mainstream media promoted, essentially. I mean, they went with the person who sat there and said, "That's not true. She sat there and she did the Rachel Maddow routine. She literally said, "If you get the vaccine, you won't get sick. You won't get the virus. You won't get sick. You won't spread it, blah, blah, blah." And she said all of that on Rising and got promoted and is now a co-host on The View. So that is the issue with mainstream media, is that they promote, like Rachel Maddow. I don't know what she's ever been right on.
She's nuts. Joanne Reed, also nuts.
And that they get promoted. They promote them. They continue, rather than punishing them and saying, guys, like, we are a news organization. We cannot be getting this stuff wrong like this. They're not. They're just like, everybody else is a conspiracy theorist, and you have to believe our dogma and our religion. If you don't, so that's the issue.
There's video of Krista Ball, Ed Schultz, Cenk Uygur, all talking about how MSNBC controls the people who are there, meaning they're not just giving their own points of view. I mean, Krista Ball even said, well, I would like to be a truth teller, but, you know, I'm a person. Right. And I have to function within this organization. And so, yeah, I agree with you. And it does feel like those guys, whatever luxury or benefit they get out of it, maybe it's just clicks. Maybe it's just other members of the cult looking at the show and then getting very mad if it doesn't necessarily fall in line. I don't know. I agree with you wholeheartedly. I don't know what they were looking at. When I was going through the map, it seemed pretty clear that she was going to lose. The only states I couldn't figure out was I was praying that she lose Michigan. And I wasn't sure if my own biases were pointing me to this notion that she was going to lose it. So I didn't know where Michigan was going to go. I think I gave it to her on the map. Every other state I gave to Trump in that sense. And so it was like, okay, I have no idea what these people are looking at in regards to her winning. At worst, it looked like Trump still won, but they went in a different direction with that. I want to also agree with you about media. Media, for me, is vitally important. I think the First Amendment is one of those things that is a luxury in this country. And the attacks on that First Amendment by the Democratic Party have become almost sacrosanct with the party. It's almost like party dogma at this point. Mm-hmm. Like when you hear people on The View saying, yeah, all of this talk on social media became a problem for Kamala Harris, which is one of the reasons she lost. So, you know, there's something wrong with that. Or they would say, well, we need our own Joe Rogan. And they treat Joe Rogan like he's the devil, like he's this MAGA extremist right winger. The guy was a Bernie Sanders voter. Yeah. And they attack him like a cow did that nonsense.
They basically did have Joe Rogan. They didn't need their own Joe Rogan. They had Joe Rogan,
he was,
as you mentioned, right? When he was a Bernie Sanders voter. They had him. They lost him when they just called everybody a conspiracy theorist, didn't want to listen to the truth, didn't like truth tellers. They wanted people to just stay in line with their robotic messaging. But yeah, I mean, that's that's the stupidity of it. They had Joe.
They had him. And they lost them. Elon Musk was a Democrat, if I'm not mistaken. Also, they lost these people. And there's this way the media goes about, like you said, alienating, especially Democrats, alienating these people and everything else. Hillary Clinton saying she wants to put people in jail for misinformation, which is one of the most ironic things in the world coming from Hillary Clinton. You get John Kerry saying we need to do some of the First Amendment. Kamala Harris has said stuff about it. Like Democrats full well believe that they need to control and limit speech. It is terrifying.
Yeah.
Donald Trump, however, is also not immune from it. So Donald Trump came out and said the first thing that he wants to do is to basically bastardize and attack the First Amendment. Now, as we know, Donald Trump got $100 million from Miriam Adelson, and I think he ended up getting 30 million of it, but that money has certainly bought an Israeli first agenda for Donald Trump.
Support.
This is him talking about conflating anti-Semitism with criticism of Israel. This is extremely dangerous.
Do to defeat anti-Semitism and defend our Jewish citizens in America. My first week back in the Oval Office, my administration will inform every college president that if you do not end anti-Semitic propaganda, they will lose their accreditation and federal taxpayer support. Truth is, you don't have to do much after that. When you do that, it's going to work miracles. Please sit down. We will not subsidize the creation of terrorist sympathizers, and we're not going to do it certainly on American soil. We're not going to do it anywhere. Next, I will inform every educational institution in our land that if they permit violence, harassment, or threats against Jewish students, the schools will be held accountable for violations of the civil rights law. Very important. Jewish Americans must have equal protection under the law.
They have more than equal protection under the law, which is what this goofball right here is doing. Also, one more, Pam Bondi. So she came out and gave, where is it? She came out and said something similar right here. Again, going after First Amendment.
They're saying,
Pam, Democrats like Alan Dershowitz have sounded the alarm over the growing virulent strain of Jew haters in the Democrat Party. It appears their agents in the unfair press are carrying that water. It is dangerous, is it not?
yeah, it's very dangerous, Chris. It's extremely dangerous. And, you know, you look around, the thing that's really the most troubling to me, these students in universities in our country, whether they're here as Americans or if they're here on student visas, and they're out there saying, I support Hamas. You and I have seen that on all of these television shows. Frankly, they need to be taken out of our country, or the FBI needs.
So she wants Americans to be kicked out of America for exercising their First Amendment right as Americans.
Yeah.
What the hell? What the hell?
It's insane. It's I don't even know how to explain it other than just there was a takeover that started in the 80s with AIPAC and the Jewish lobby, ultimately the pro-Israel Jewish lobby, that they look like our government has been up for sale for a long time, and a lot of different industries and interests have purchased our government. So when you see, and this should be alarming for all Americans, no matter how they feel about Israel, and even if they agree with Trump and Pam Bondi that they want anti-Semitism to be outlawed, you know, they want hate speech to be punished or something. It should still be alarming to every American that our government is up for sale, and that it can go up for sale even to foreign interests, that they're able to come in and do that, and they're able to then persuade our politicians to pass laws that are totally and completely antithetical to what America is supposed to be about, which is freedom, free speech, all of those things, right? So there was actually, Netanyahu was the one who actually put this in place when he was working. He wasn't the prime minister yet of Israel, but he started to see in the 80s that the US government was up for sale. And he started basically a campaign to start purchasing American politicians. And that has paid off. I mean, it took a while. It started in the 80s, and this is fairly documented. Started in the 80s, ramped up. But if you remember in the 80s and in the 90s, I mean, when I was growing up in the 80s and 90s, the group that had more of a control over, you know, the culture and what you can and cannot say and how you can and cannot live your life was really the conservative Christian base in the United States. Like they were very powerful. Every politician had to basically do a photo op going to church. Every politician had to say which Christian religion they were. And, you know, they had to really put that out there because that was a very powerful force in the US in American politics. But that shifted after these politicians got bought off. And slowly we've seen fewer of those photo ops. And instead the photo ops are being replaced with Israel's flag behind the politician, going to the Wailing Wall, going to the Wailing Wall. You know, saying going and speaking to AIPAC conferences or other sort of pro-Israel Jewish lobby groups and organizations, and saying like, I love Israel, America's greatest ally, you know, all of the talking points. And that should scare the living daylights out of every American and don't think for a second the other countries haven't figured this out and that industries haven't figured this out. Of course they know. And China has been doing it in a different way and could potentially start doing it this way. I mean, the way that China controls narratives, whether you agree with those narratives or not, is not important, because what matters is the fact that there's a lack of free speech, right? So China's been able to control narratives by all of these manufacturers being in their country and then basically saying, if you want to continue manufacturing in our country using our cheap labor, then you cannot be saying this, you know, you're like, for example, if you're Nike, and you endorse certain athletes and you're giving them $4 million a year for that endorsement, you know, for them to endorse your product. And then that athlete speaks up against China. You're like, we got a problem and your factory is here in China. So so China figured out that America's up for sale through business, that the business class controls speech in America. And that's really accurate. The business class controls a lot. So they figured out that, okay, look, if you want to keep doing business in China, these are the things that you are going to have to cater to, whether you like it or not. And we saw, like Mark Zuckerberg, he wanted to expand Facebook into China. And China said, we're not going to let you expand it. This was like, I don't know, 15 years ago. We're not going to let you expand it into China if you're not willing to curb free speech. And Mark Zuckerberg at first was like, no, I'm an American. We can't do that. Like, that's not something we can do. And so he had to give up the business opportunities in China. But then slowly he changed his mind and he was like, well, okay, wait, I do want to do some business in China. He now speaks Chinese fluently. And he's like, yeah, and he's willing to, he's trying to do everything he can to open up the China market and to get Facebook or Meta into China, willing to sacrifice American values in order to do that. And that is what we've seen, is that these politicians, these businesses, they're willing to sacrifice American values for whatever big money interest is at play, whether that big money interest be, big pharma, whether it be big ag, whether it be, big sugar, right? Whether it be Israel or China or anything. And this just shows how easy it is to buy off these politicians. They all come with a price. Trump, it turns out you can buy an American president for $100 million. We now know the price tag.
Is it really American values, though? And the reason I ask that, considering what I just pointed out, that the Democratic Party, meaning one of the main parties, is against free speech and is working against free speech. I mean, even Joe Biden, when he was in office and he was using Nina Jankowicz, the singing fact checker, who he was putting at the head of the Ministry of Truth, that was going to do an end run around the First Amendment by using social media companies as a way of bleeding out or censorship of things that they didn't particularly like. Meaning, Nina Jankowicz would have censored or pushed Facebook to censor you. And you're saying, well, hey, this doesn't prevent the spread. Okay, we need to censor her. She's giving information that we don't necessarily like. No, it is true, but we don't like it. So we need to put balance.
Ukraine, that's malinformation, they call it. Malinformation.
Malinformation. Yeah. Or if I point out, I say, well, we've expanded NATO to the border and we knocked over the Ukrainian government. How is this unprovoked? Well, they say, okay, we don't like that. That's malinformation. That's it's true, but we don't like it. Is it really an American value when push comes to shove that they're willing to silence Americans? These guys on the other side wants to silence Republicans. And I guess one thing is like China is not going to allow Facebook or YouTube or these things into the country because they're propaganda outlets. If you allow an outlet like Facebook or Twitter is not necessarily doing it now, but Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, that they only give an American perspective. So if you put on, let's say, RT, or you put on Sputnik, or you put on a foreign media outlet that the United States doesn't like, YouTube will remove it. But if you put on a pro-Ukrainian, pro-Israeli point of view, they will play it through and through. You can say whatever you want. And so if you're putting that into China or Russia, and Russia's like, okay, so we can't give our point of view, but they can give theirs. Okay, well, you're just doing this at the perspective of, or at the behest of the American government. These are propaganda outlets. It's like having a Radio Free Europe, but instead it's a social media company that does it. I guess if China is doing something similar, aren't these things on some level equal in the way that they're being expressed, especially in regards to war?
Well, I mean, China doesn't have a culture of free speech. It's not something that they...
That I agree with you. I do agree.
And the people are okay with that. I mean, that's something also to understand, is that Eastern values are different than Western values.
Right.
And the Eastern mentality does not value, and I grew up half and half. I grew up, I'm half Eastern, half Western, and trying to explain growing up to either of my parents what the other one was thinking and why was always like a mental feat of acrobatics.
The West always act like they're robots. And it's like, well, no, they're not robots. They just agree. That's the difference.
And the East, I mean, they both have their criticisms of the other. And I see the validity in both of the criticisms. I understand. I mean, the Eastern mentality is, the Western mentality is fat, lazy. They don't help each other out. They're not, they don't strategize they don't do any long-term strategy. They just think of the now. And Asian mentality is a very Asian mentality is just very different with that. And they like, screw your free, with Asian mentality, it's kind of like, screw your freedom. You do it. We do these things for the benefit of the whole. And in the end, you'll have more freedom because you're going to, like, for example, when you're a kid, well, at least when maybe things have changed, but when I was a kid, it wasn't like, they didn't prioritize birthdays, birthday parties, sleepovers. That type of stuff isn't really a thing in Asian culture like it is in Western culture, where, the kids have play dates and the kids go in and do sleepovers and they have birthday parties. Like Asian culture, it's just, you study all the time. You then go and play your sport and you work hard at that. You go play your instrument, you work hard at that. And if you do have a little bit of free time, we'll let you play some video games. But that's like the extent of it. And that's, but their viewpoint is like, look, you're a kid. You're not supposed to have all this freedom. Your job right now is to work hard, keep your nose to the grindstone, get good grades, and then go to college, get good grades. And then you get into your career, you still don't party. Your job is to rise up in your career. And then once you have the success, party away. You'll have all the money. You'll also have all the money and you'll be having a great time. And then you can go and do all of that. Well, and you'll have kids, and grandma and me, your mom and dad are going to move in, and we're going to help you raise the kids so that you can go work, make money, and have a good time because you've earned it. So it's kind of this, it's a different, whereas the Western mentality is, I want you to do what you love, choose whatever career you want, be free. Right. You just be you, whatever makes you happy. It's a very individualistic, whatever makes you happy mentality. And the Asian culture is, don't bring shame to the family. We are working together. This is a unit. And these things will bring us all prosperity. And it does work. I mean, I will say that my Asian side, my Eastern side is way more prosperous, way more successful. And they just came here as immigrants with nothing. And yet they had a different mentality that made them way more successful than my Western side. So there is like this difference in mentality. And China, I don't dock them for that mentality at all. It's just different. I personally don't like it as much. I prefer Western mentality in some regards, but I still have a lot of the Eastern in me. But point being, I think with the US, I do think that it is part of our Western values. I do think that it is ingrained in the average American to have that freedom, that individualistic mentality, that free speech, that freedom of the individual. What you're referring to is there's two different society. There's another American value that tends to take over, and that is money, that wanting money and wanting to make more of that money. And that is very much ingrained in us as well. Like it's, we do live in a capitalistic, and I think it's great in a lot of ways because I want the opportunity to make, to do what I can and make as much as I can and have success. I don't want that limited in any way. And so when people get a lot of success, though, and they become a big industry, they then tend to want to limit, and like I wouldn't say like limit others around them so much as make sure that they are still in the advantage, right? They want to make sure they're in the advantage to continue their success and making money. And they kind of rig it. They rig the game, right, for them against everybody else. And if that includes censorship, then that includes censorship. If that includes like kind of pissing on American values that are, that it's just that it's a competition of the values that we see kind of take form between the individual, the freedom, the culture that we love in that way, but also the desire to make a lot of money.
Yeah. I guess my thought is, but this is more political. I mean, the Trump thing is political. And even the Kamala Harris thing is political. I mean, when they're talking about it on The View, they're talking about it in the sense that the reason that she lost is because people had too much free speech. They could talk about too many things. They were too diluted in their conversations. It was that type of angle to it. Like, I understand what you mean about the corporation thing. Corporations will, what was the line? They'll sell you the rope that they use to hang themselves, something like that. So there's that. I accept that part. I mean, more so like, I am deeply worried that the political space gets into this mindset that because we have moved past mainstream media and guardrails that are set up on mainstream media and what they can say and everything else. And you can have something that happens anywhere around the world and immediately you can see it for yourself. I don't need you to really tell me, I can see it. In which case I can form an opinion based on what I'm seeing. Okay, well, they're like, okay, well, that's too much freedom. That's them having too much conversation. And that hurts us when we are lying to the public in order for us to stay in power or get in power.
Again, I think it's the competition of another American value. It's the competing forces, and that one is competition. Competition is another American value, right?
Okay,
so their team needs to win, and they'll rig it for their team to win. And if that means you will give up this other American value that we adore, which is free speech, in order to get it. The problem is we haven't prioritized free speech to that level, to the level of like, it is above and beyond all. We just haven't done that.
No, I agree with you. Like I always tell people, well, I'm an American. And so my value set is going to be based on America. So even though I'm criticizing it from the value set that I had, grown up with in America, which is a weird phenomena, right? It's like, okay, these are the values that I've got from the country itself. And these values are allowing me to criticize the country because it's not living up to the values that it was imbued in me. Yeah, there's that. Last question. Is Joe Biden going to take us to the Third World War?
I mean, are we already in World War III? Because we might be.
Actually.
Yeah, we might be at the beginning. Yeah, it does kind of look like when we look back at the history books, they will point to this time period, this last year, starting in 2023, of the beginning. Yeah, the beginning of World War III. Yeah. So hopefully it doesn't ramp up. I mean, we'll see how this war pans out and how it ends. Hopefully it just kind of, I hope it just fizzles. Yeah, well, I'm also concerned with Trump because the rhetoric coming out of him has been very escalate to de-escalate sort of idea, which, he ran on this, I want to end the wars, I'm going to end the wars. And a lot of Americans, I mean, it wasn't their number one priority for why they voted for Trump. They voted for him mostly economy and border, right? But foreign policy was definitely up there for people and on the top of their brains. And nobody just asked him how he was going to do it. So there was this.
I'm doing it in 24 hours.
I'm going to end the wars. But then everybody was like, great. And we just kind of assumed he would just end the wars and stop funding. And that's how he would do it. Because that's like what we all think how we would do it. But he instead
he's been absent. He's been they have been ramping up. And he's been talking about everything else.
He's been talking about ramping up the wars. I mean, he's sitting there saying now, he's going to escalate to try to his plan is to nuke the Middle East. I mean, he literally said that yesterday. He was like, I'm going to nuke the Middle East. If you don't give up the hostages, then I'm going to nuke you. And we know he says, I'm going to nuke you because he said, you're going to get, not like bombarded in a way that the US has never in its history done. Well, we've dropped 2 nukes. So if it's going to be even bigger than that, then you're going to use the new nukes on the Middle East. And we just don't know if he means nuking the Palestinians or nuking Iran. He says the same thing about Russia. He says the way he's going to end the war. Well, he hasn't said this, but his surrogates.
That's what I mean. He's been
his surrogates.
Quiet.
Right. But his surrogates have gone on Fox News and have said that the way that Trump plans to end the war with Russia is threatening Russia by saying, we're going to give Ukraine everything. We'll give them our entire arsenal unless you come to the table and negotiate. So his plan is escalate to de-escalate, just like he is with the tariff war. Like, we'll just ramp up the tariffs, ramp up the sanctions, right? We'll ramp it up and you'll love us or you'll be punished. Like, love us or you'll feel pain is kind of his idea.
I agree with.
So we'll see if I don't think these other countries are going to back down. I don't think that they're going to.
I cover this stuff for a living. I'm telling you. I'm scared. Look, I'm scared of them for different reasons. I'm concerned about Joe Biden because he has invested so much of his own political capital, and he's staked this idea of Western exceptionalism on Ukraine, and they're going to lose Ukraine. And so I don't necessarily know if these guys are going to be able to detach from that as opposed to sleepwalk into a larger conflict. In regards to Trump, it's exactly what you said. This idea also hubristic idea that he can escalate to de-escalate. There's no room for that in Ukraine. The US and Europe
there isn't,
lose a conventional war. They have
not only
nothing
that, Russia can't afford to back down.
Exactly.
This is an existential issue for Russia. It's not an existential issue for NATO. It's just a desire. NATO just wants to piss off Russia. Russia's looking at it like, you're on our freaking borders, guys. Like, you cannot be here. And so for them, it's existential. They cannot afford to lose. They will not back down no matter what Donald Trump says. So
they will end the world if they need to end the world to protect Russia. I mean, that's where they are, because I agree with you. It is existential. For NATO, though, NATO has taken this as if it is existential, because on some level, NATO staked this entire credibility on this.
They're just going to have egg on their face. I mean, look, one side will have egg on their face. One side is existential. Well, then, you know what? Take the egg. I'd rather just take the egg.
That's it. I don't know if they're going to take that egg and go home. That's for the last 2 years. I kept thinking, are they going to stop? Are they going to keep this up?
I think that they, if Trump is going to be, one of two things is going to happen. I mean, Trump's going to come to office. He's going to make these strongman claims. Putin is not going to back down. And then Trump's going to have to make a decision. Is he really, is he going to be a man of his word and try to, I mean, there's some good news here. I don't think he is a man of his word. And I'm not saying that like in a negative, like, oh, Trump's a big liar. And but I think that I don't think he's a man of his word on this. I don't think he wants war, actually. So I think he's fine playing the mental game and trying to, so I tried that strategy didn't work. So
your mouth to God's ear.
Shoot, now I got to do something else. So I think, I don't think he's like, I said it and I had a red line and I meant it, damn it. I just don't see him as that type of guy. I see him as really mercurial, and he'll just be like, well, I tried that strategy. It didn't work. So I guess we're going to try something else. So I think,
over this.
I think he'll maybe, but I think the people around him have a different agenda. And if he's not willing to go with them, I wouldn't be surprised to see another assassination, and it wouldn't be an attempt.
Oh, man.
I
said something like that too. He was like, Trump is not safe. And the guy,
he's not safe at all.
Yeah. Him, I deeply appreciated this. Thank you for this.
This was really great. Fun conversation. I really liked it.
Kim Iversen. Kim, where can people find you?
Rumble. I'm on Rumble Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. I do put clips from that show onto YouTube, but if you want to get the whole show, which is about an hour and a half, 2 hours long, depending on the day, then you got to go to Rumble, which if you just go to KimIversonShow.com, it'll route you to the right channel, and, subscribe to it, and, like, share, subscribe type thing, and then, and watch the show. So yeah.
Check her out. Check her out. Thank you for this.
Thank you. Goodbye, everyone.
All right, guys. I am going to end this. Let me see. Do we have any chats? We do have 2 chats. Let's see. It says, ask about Mexico and all-out war. Okay. I don't think there's going to be an all-out war. So keep rocking.
Because we're going to send the military down into Mexico and clean up the cartels. Look, if we're going to do anything with our military, by the way, if we're going to do something in a foreign environment, that's the one I actually agree. I'm like, because that's actually our neighbor. That's actually our border. That's like that's actually has more effect on us as a country. If we're going to use our foreign resources to go and invade places, that would be the place we would invade. And then we could all start going and vacationing in Mexico, and it would be a safe place and beautiful. And right. I mean, that's, to me, makes the most sense. But of course, we're going to go bomb Iran. Sheinbaum,
apparently, he talked to her on the phone when they were making threats, or when he was making threats of 20% tariffs on Canada.
On Canada and Mexico.
Yeah. So he apparently has talked to her. Kim, thank you for this. You have a good one, okay?
Thank you.
All right, guys. I'm going to end this. Like it, share it, subscribe to it. Hit the notification bell. If you like it, you can support it through PayPal, Patreon, or Super Chat. All chats will be read, providing they're not racist, sexist, poor, bigoted. You guys have a phenomenal day. Signing off. All right. And